Welcome to Black Letter Money. This is part 2 to the series, The Built-in Secret of Black Letter Money. Last time, we covered the meeting in November 1910. Jekyll Island, the 6 men, 9 days, complete secrecy. They built a detailed plan for the central banking system, but because of who they were, it would never pass. And this is where we will continue. The plan that came out of Jekyll Island, the Aldrich Plan, was presented to Congress in 1911, and it went nowhere. The Democrats had just taken control of the House, and they were going to hand a victory to Nelson Aldrich, a Republican senator with Rockefeller family connections. This was the most significant financial legislation in decades. No way. The plan stalled, and then something interesting happened. In this episode, we're going to cover 3 things. First, how the Jekyll Island Plan got reborn under a completely different political identity. Second, what the Federal Reserve Act actually created when it was passed, and how it differed from the original plan. And third, the legal structure it built, the one that still runs today, and why the ambiguity in that structure was not an accident. The Aldrich Plan died in Congress, but the ideas didn't. In 1912, Woodrow Wilson won the presidency. The Democrats now had control over the White House and both chambers of Congress. Wilson had run on a platform of taking on concentrated financial power. In other words, the same banks that had sent representatives to Jekyll Island. On paper, this was the worst possible political environment for the Jekyll Island Plan to survive. And yet, in March 1913, the new House Banking and Currency Committee put Congressman Carter Glass of Virginia in charge of drafting a new banking bill. Glass brought in H. Parker Willis, an economics professor, as his advisor. Together, they took the core architecture of the Aldrich Plan, the regional structure, the elastic currency, the commercial paper backing, and they revised it. The most significant change was governance. Aldrich Plan had the banks electing their own board. Wilson insisted that the new bill include a Federal Reserve Board, whose members would be appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. This was a very meaningful structural difference. The central bank would have a layer of democratic accountability that the Jekyll Island Plan had explicitly avoided. In the Senate, Robert Lytham Owen of Oklahoma introduced a companion bill. Owen was a Democrat, a populist, who was deeply suspicious of concentrated banking power. His bill had differences from Glass's, mainly fewer reserve banks. These 2 bills passed their respective chambers and went to the conference committee to be reconciled. What came out was the Glass-Owen bill, which would become the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Here is the political irony. The bill was overwhelmingly supported by anti-banker Democrats and opposed by pro-banker Republicans. The party that had campaigned against Wall Street passed the central banking plan that Wall Street had designed in secret 3 years earlier, under a different name, with different sponsors, with just enough modification to give it political cover. Whether that represents a genuine reform or an elegant rebranding is a question historians still debate. The final bill went back to Congress in December 1913. The House approved it 289 to 60 on December 22nd. The Senate passed it 43 to 25 on December 23rd, and President Wilson signed it into law that same evening, December 23rd, 1913. Timing matters. Congress passed a major financial legislation 2 days before Christmas, when most Americans were not paying close attention. Whether that was done deliberate or coincidental is one of those questions the record does not answer. What it does answer is that from a secret meeting in November 1910 to the president's signature in December 1913, 3 years and 1 month passed. 3 years to turn a private island blueprint into federal law. The preamble for the Federal Reserve Act says it is an act to provide for the establishment of Federal Reserve banks, to furnish an elastic currency, to afford rediscontinuing commercial paper, to establish a more effective supervision of banking in the United States, and for all other purposes. Now, let's break that down because those words matter. 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, not one central bank in Washington. 12 regional institutions, each serving a specific district of the country. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Richmond, Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Dallas, and San Francisco, each one acting as a central bank for its region. The decentralized structure was a deliberate political compromise. Supporters of centralized control got the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, overseeing all 12. An elastic currency. Before 1913, the amount of money in circulation was essentially fixed. It was tied to government bonds. When the economy grew, there wasn't necessarily more money to support that growth. When a panic hit, banks couldn't get additional cash to meet the withdrawals. The Federal Reserve Act changed this fundamentally. The Fed could now issue Federal Reserve notes. In other words, the paper money you carry today, backed by commercial assets rather than government bonds. The money supply could expand when the economy needed it and contract when it didn't. That flexibility is why the system was built. A lender of last resort. This function was the entire point of Jekyll Island. In a banking panic, when banks can't get cash from anywhere else, the Federal Reserve can lend to them directly. The institution that J.P. Morgan had improvised personally in 1907 was now a permanent, legal, institutional function. No more relying on one private citizen being awake and willing to act. Supervision of member banks. The Fed was given regulatory authority over banks that joined the system. National banks were required to join. State banks could choose to join. This gave Federal Reserve a direct supervisory role over a significant portion of the American banking system from day one. Here is where the legal structure gets genuinely interesting and where the built-in tension from Jekyll Island becomes most visible. The Federal Reserve System is neither fully public nor fully private. And that is not an oversight. It was designed that way. The Board of Governors in Washington is a government agency. Its 7 members are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. They serve staggered 14-year terms, deliberately longer than any presidential term, so that no single president can stack the board. The board sets monetary policy, supervises the system, and is accountable to Congress. But the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks are technically private institutions. They are owned by their member banks, commercial banks that hold stock in the regional Fed. Those member banks elect 6 of the 9 directors of each regional bank. The other 3 are appointed by the Board of Governors. So, the institution that controls the money supply of the United States is simultaneously a government agency and a privately owned corporation. Its governors are appointed by elected officials. Its regional banks are owned by the banks they regulate. The profits the Fed earns after expenses and a dividend paid to member banks goes to the Treasury. The Fed is not designed to make money for its private owners, but those private owners, the member banks, do have a formal structural role in its governance. This structure was not an accident. It was a compromise that made this bill passable. Populists who feared a private banking cartel got a presidentially appointed board. Bankers who feared government control of credit got regional banks they partially owned and directed. Both sides got something. Neither side got everything. And the ambiguity between public accountability and private influence has been debated, litigated, and argued about ever since. The payoff and what this means. The Federal Reserve Act created something that had never existed in the United States before: a permanent institutional mechanism for managing the money supply, preventing banking panics, and acting as a financial backbone of the economy. Whether it has done those things well and for whose benefit is a subject for Part 3. What this episode establishes is a legal foundation. The act is real. The structure is documented. The votes are on record. The ambiguity between public and private was built deliberately. And the architecture that came out of the private island in 1910 that was modified, rebranded, and passed under a different political banner has been the operating system of American money for over 100 years. In Part 3, we go inside the machine. How does the Federal Reserve actually create money? What does elastic currency mean in practice? And who benefits when the money supply expands? We are just getting started. If this is the kind of thing you wish someone had explained to you sooner, there's a lot more where this came from. Subscribe to Black Letter Money. This is what we do here: the law and the money. Together, explained clearly. I'll see you on the next one.